Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. I woke to 3 short knocks that didn't belong to the wind. The television in the front room was still murmuring an old fishing show, the captions drifting across the screen like minnows. My hips ached from sleeping crooked on the sofa, and the house had that late-night stillness the orchard gets when the air sits heavy on the trees. Then the knocks came again, hurried off rhythm, not polite. I reached for the big mag light I keep by the door and called, "Who is it?" The word hadn't finished leaving my mouth when a voice I knew down to the grain of it answered thin with panic. "Mom, it's me." I got the deadbolt back and the door swung wide on its swollen frame. June stumbled in the porch light, cutting her face into hard and soft a swelling under one eye. A split at the corner of her mouth already crusted a smear of road dust on her cheekbone. Her winter coat hung lopsided. One sleeve was half inside out as if she'd dressed while moving. She hugged her middle like she was holding herself together. I didn't ask questions. The trooper part of my brain slipped into place as if it had been waiting in the hall all these years. I guided her to the sofa, propped a throw pillow at her back, and checked her breathing. The left side of her ribcage rose shallow. When she winced at my touch, I eased off. "Where's your phone?" I asked. "In my pocket," she said, voice ragged. Don't answer if it rings." "Okay." I rinsed a clean dish towel under cold water and dabbed at her mouth. She closed her eyes and breathed through it. The orchard clock in the kitchen ticked too loudly. On the end table beneath the trooper's hat I hadn't worn in a decade sat my old digital camera reflex, not nostalgia. I lifted June's chin with 2 fingers. "Mom," she whispered. Not protest this time, warning or embarrassment. I kept my voice even. "We need a record." The flash popped once, twice, then I killed it and let the room lamp do the work. I shot the eye, the mouth, the scuffed knuckles where she'd thrown a hand up. When I lifted the hem of her coat to check her torso, I found blossoming bruises along the lower ribs, the kind that tell a story even the liar can't talk over. I stopped there. "Emergency room," I said. "I don't want him to know where I am." "He won't." Outside, the air had that river chill that slips under your coat and takes a seat on your spine. I got her into the truck, buckled her myself, and took the old county road into town. Fog lay low over the ditch grass. The orchard rose past like the ribs of a whale. June kept both hands at her stomach and stared straight ahead, as if looking at me would make it harder to stay upright. Halfway there, her phone buzzed in her coat. She flinched. I let it buzz. At Hocking Valley General, the night nurse at triage didn't waste time. Dr. Patel met us with a nod that said she'd seen me before long ago in a different capacity. She lifted June's shirt with 2 fingers, then looked at me. "X-rays." "CBC keeper NPO," she told the nurse low. Then to June, softer. "We're going to be careful and thorough." I stayed at the head of the bed while they worked my hand on the rail where June could find it if she wanted. When the nurse stepped out to call radiology, June's phone buzzed again on the tray. The screen lit private number, then a voicemail notification. Another vibration, a text banner that read, "Don't test me." I picked up the phone, opened nothing, and tapped through to the voicemail list. The newest file was 10 seconds long. I put the phone on speaker for 1 beat, only enough to catch a man's voice, flattened by anger and a cheap microphone. "Keep your mouth shut," or I stopped it and saved it. Years of chain of custody habits don't fade. They go quiet and wait to be used. June watched my face. "Cole," she said as if the name itself explained the evening. I tucked the phone back. "We'll let the doctor do her job," I said. While radiology took her, I stepped into the hallway where the vending machine hummed like summer locusts. The fluorescent ceiling had a dead bulb that flickered every 4th cycle, the kind of nothing detail your brain grabs when it doesn't want the other pictures. My phone lit with a text from our neighbors, the Ortegas 2 houses down the lane. "You awake? Our doorbell caught someone at yours looked like June." "Want the clip?" "Yes," I wrote. "Please." A minute later, a link appeared. I watched on mute my porch, bleached by that porch light. I still mean to fix June at the door, the way she wrapped an arm around her ribs between knocks. The timestamp read 12:37 a.m. I downloaded the file and sent a copy to a cloud folder I keep for things I can't afford to lose. When I came back, Dr. Patel had returned with the films. "Contusions," she said, measuring her words with her eyes on June. "No obvious fracture. We'll observe a few hours repeat vitals, watch for changes." June's face loosened by a degree, the kind of relief people mistake for calm. I brushed her hair off her forehead and she leaned into the touch, the way she used to when she was small and had run too hard in summer and scraped both knees at once. "Can I sleep?" she asked. "You can try," Dr. Patel said and dimmed the light. I sat the kind of sitting that isn't rest. The hospital has its own weather, the smell of antiseptic and lemon wax, the whisper of shoe soles, the beep that insists on its own importance. The nurse brought me a paper cup of coffee, which I forgot to drink. When the monitor settled into a steady rhythm and June's breathing evened, I went down to the lobby to call from a corner where the cell signal didn't die against the cinder block. The person I called answered on the second ring. "Records," he said, and then hearing my voice, "May, you all right at this hour?" "Rudy," I said, "I need you to check something in the morning." "I can check something now." I hesitated. "The deed on the Orchard Hollis farm. Make sure nobody's been playing games with my signature." There was a silence that wasn't static. I heard him working keys. "May." "Rudy. Paperwork filed last week. Transfer to an LLC out of Lancaster Three Rivers Holdings. It's got your name and June's on it, Notary T. Monroe." He cleared his throat. "Looks clean on its face." The floor under me felt less like floor for a breath and more like the slick metal of a boat ramp. I set a hand on the wall and the wall held. "I didn't sign anything," I said. "I knew you were going to say that. Send me what you can. I'll email you the public copy. The rest stays put until you come in. Appreciate it." Upstairs, the monitor still ticked its patient metronome. I took the chair again and watched the shape of June's shoulder under the sheet rise and fall the rhythm of a body insisting on itself. In the reflection on the dark window, my trooper's hat sat where I had left it, brim catching the room light. I slid the camera back into my coat pocket and kept the phone where I could reach it. The orchard would be black as a well right now. Out there, the trees hold darkness the way they hold fruit, quietly without announcement. I stayed until the color at the edge of the blinds began to lift. Morning moved slow and the hospital lights dimming, monitors softening as if the building itself respected sleep. By 8, Dr. Patel signed the chart to keep June for observation and a second set of vitals before noon. June drifted in and out. The color had come back into her lips, but her voice stayed small from using it all up the night before. When she asked for water, I wet her mouth with a sponge and told her I needed to step out for a couple of hours to run something down. She nodded without opening her eyes. "You'll be back before lunch." "I will." Outside, the air had a dull metallic edge, the kind that comes before rain and makes the orchard smell like penny and bark. I drove the 5 blocks to the county building, a low brick square with a flag that slapped once, paused, and slapped again. Inside, the recorder's office kept the thermostat 2 degrees too cold. It woke the ache in my knuckles. Rudy looked up from behind a counter stacked with manila folders. He had a coffee the color of axle grease and a face that could do sympathy without looking like pity. "I sent the public copy," he said. "Figured you'd come anyway. I like paper in my hand." He slid a packet across the counter. The top page wore the county seal and the instrument number like a badge. Below, warranty deed, Hollis Farm to Three Rivers Holdings, LLC. The acknowledgement block carried 2 signatures that meant to be ours. Mine looked like someone copying my name from a form, where they'd seen it once, then adding a flourish. June's had the loops wrong. The notary stamp said T. Monroe Commission expires 22/18/2029, with a date on the certificate that read 10 days ago. I ran a finger under the impression. The paper dented where a seal had bitten, but the ink looked new, black that hadn't given itself to the fibers yet. "Who filed?" I asked. "E-recording," Rudy said. "Came through Hawking Title and Abstract, but it was walked into them first. Front desk remembers a kid with a messenger bag and a man who wouldn't sit down. Wouldn't sit down. He wore a jacket with Barrett stitched on the chest and told anyone who'd listen he was doing the county a favor getting this mess straight. That tightened something in my jaw I didn't have time to rub out. I nodded at the public terminals along the wall. "Your Secretary of State kiosks still live. For business filings, 3rd screen." Rudy lowered his voice. "We're counties, May. We can keep records. We can't sort fools." "I'm not asking you to." At the kiosk, I typed with 2 fingers. The Ohio SOS site loaded like it had been warned to take its time. Three Rivers Holdings, LLC, organized last month. Statutory agent Shore Nina L. Macy, mailing P.O. Box in Lancaster. Organizer an out-of-town paralegal service that set up shelves for a fee. There was a filed statement of authority that would let the LLC sign on loans without much friction. My reflection in the monitor looked like a woman who needed more sleep and less noise. I printed and paid the 75 cents cash. On the way back to the counter, I stopped at a board where notaries pinned their commissions like fresh hunting licenses. Monroe Trevor. Commission issue date 5 days ago. I compared it to the deed's notarization date. The math did itself. "Rudy," I said quietly, "your notary's commission started 5 days after this says it was notarized." He exhaled through his nose. "I can't give you his log, but you can take that picture." He meant the board. I did, then took another of the deed's acknowledgement block. The overhead fluorescence banded the images. I shifted until they didn't. At the diner, the bell over the door stuck on its second ring. The place smelled like bacon fat and hot coffee, and the lemon cleaner they used to make a floor look tied up and respectable. I took a stool. May, the waitress said, cautious in a way she wasn't last month. You want your regular black, I said. Leave it. Two men at a table by the window angled their bodies so their words carried. He's always been a good man, one said, meaning Cole. Gives tires to folks at cost when he doesn't have to. Gets folks back on the road, the other said. Church liked that donation for the youth drive. That orchard's too much for two women anyhow. I looked at the countertop, not their faces. A deacon from First Baptist came in and patted my shoulder like a cousin at a visitation. Praying for June, he said, and then too soft to be asked to repeat, and for you to find peace in this disagreement. It isn't disagreement when one person's body gets turned into a ledger entry. I let the words die before they did anything they couldn't undo. My coffee came hot and hard. I drank some and left cash under the saucer. On the way out, a man I'd once written for a bad stop sign said, "Don't you miss the days you could pull folks over and make them behave?" I stopped at the door. "I miss a clean highway," I said. He looked pleased with himself for getting a rise. He'd gotten less than he thought. At Avery Pike's office, the blinds were pulled to make winter light into strips. Avery liked his edges clean. He wore a tie that told you he still believed court was a place you dressed for. He skimmed the packet, turned it sideways, then back the way a man might check a map before choosing a road. On its face, he said, "This transfer is tidy. Title company in the middle, an LLC with paperwork in order, an acknowledgement before a commissioned notary. Your signatures are wrong, but wrong is not the same as proven false." Monroe's commission began 5 days after the date. On that notarization, I said, pushing my phone across the desk with the two photographs, the county board and the deed's acknowledgement block. Avery zoomed with a finger and thumb. He made a low sound I'd heard from mechanics who'd found the real problem. "If the commission date is from the Secretary of State's site, we can take judicial notice. That helps. Tell me about June." "She's hurting. The doctor is careful. I have images. I have a voicemail." "Do you have the clip from the neighbor?" "Yes." He tapped the desk once. "We can seek a temporary restraining order and move to set aside the deed ex parte on an emergency basis given the domestic context." He set down the phone, his eyes not leaving mine. "I need to say out loud that the other side may come at you with counter-accusations." "They already did," I said. As if the universe took cues, someone knocked twice and opened the door halfway. A process server in a windbreaker held a manila envelope like a pizza. "Ms. Hollis." "Yes." He passed it without stepping inside. "You've been served." He left before the door could close. Avery didn't touch the envelope. I opened it. The first page wore a caption in bold: "Petition for temporary restraining order. Cole Barrett vs. May Hollis." The affidavit inside accused me of harassment, intimidation, and abuse of prior office to influence public officials, a sentence long enough to be a net. The exhibits were printouts of my name on an old trooper roster and 3 photographs somebody took of me at the county building this morning. Avery slid his glasses down his nose. "They're trying to set the table. Don't talk about this in the wrong rooms." "I know the rooms." He nodded once. "I'll file. I want everything you have in one place: images, clip, voicemail, your notes with dates and times. Keep your circle small. My circle is 2 people and a neighbor who brings soup. That's the right size." He stood. "Take care of June. I'll see the judge." Back at the hospital, rain finally came, a clean, straight fall that erased the faint chalk line of salt in the parking lot. June was half awake and wanted to know if the orchard looked different under a sky like that. "It all looks the same when it rains," I said. "Even the posts you mean to replace look better." She smiled without opening her eyes. The nurse clicked through vitals and made a small, satisfied sound. "Doctor will look again at noon," she said, and left us to the kind of quiet you purchase with exhaustion. I pulled the chair close and put my bag on my lap like I meant to guard it. The packet from Rudy, the printouts from the SOS site, the photographs of the notary board, the deed's acknowledgement paper that spoke if you let it line up. On the top page, Shore Nina L. sat next to statutory agent, as if it had always belonged there. The address on file wasn't a house. It was a P.O. box and a line that read in parentheses, "Service at place of employment, Blue Lantern, E. Maine." Outside the window, the rain washed the parking lot into a mirror. June breathed the kind of breathing that said sleep had finally found her again. I traced the edge of the paper with a thumb until the corner went soft. Then I put everything away in order from newest to oldest and sat with the sound of rain until the clock above the door turned its hands to 12. By late afternoon, the rain had thinned to a mist that made the world look half-sanded. Dr. Patel signed June out with instructions that fit on one page, but meant more than that. Ice rest, no strain come back if breath changed or pain sharpened. I brought her home, settled her in the room that once held a quilt frame and now held quiet, and left the door open so the house could do the listening with me. Mrs. Ortega sent over soup that steamed like a small miracle. June sipped and slept with the spoon still in her hand. When the porch light clicked on by timer, I locked the front door and tested the back once for good measure. The manila envelope rode shotgun. Inside the deed copy, the notary photo, the printouts from the Secretary of State, the page where Nina L. Shore sat beside statutory agent like a name on a mailbox. The badge I hadn't worn in 10 years lay in my coat pocket, not for display, not for nostalgia. Some tools just asked to be within reach. Blue Lantern kept its sign lit even in rain. The neon threw a green band across E Main and made the puddles look deeper than they were. Inside the air was a layered thing, beer-fried onions, a citrus cleaner that couldn't keep up, and the metal sweet wine of an old ice machine. A baseball game moved across a silent TV in right field slow motion. I picked the corner booth with a view of the door and slid the envelope to the far edge of the table, where only my hand could reach it. The bartender was a man with a forearm tattoo of a river fish and a voice that could land a plane. "What can I get you?" "Club soda," I said. "Plenty of lime." He set it down and left me to it. I watched rain while it did the patient work that people pretend is sudden. At 9, a couple came in from a county over, shaking umbrellas. At 9:15, a man in a cap with a feed store logo counted out singles and didn't look up. At 9:40, the door let in a woman in a red sweater and a denim skirt, hair pinned back like she'd done it twice before she liked it. She paused, let her eyes adjust, and made herself into a person who knew where she was going. "Nina Shore?" I asked when she drew level with the booth. She looked down like I'd stepped on her name. "Do I know you?" "No," I said. "I know the business you work for on paper. Sit if you like, stand if you don't." She looked toward this bar, took the booth opposite, and kept her purse on her lap with a hand on the zipper. She was younger than the age Worry had written on her. "I pour drinks," she said. "I don't run companies." I slid the first page across the SOS filing with her name, where statutory agent ought to be. Then the deed to Hollis Farm. Then the acknowledgement block with T. Monroe's commission dates stamped like a dare. I kept my voice level. "Your name is how mail finds a thing. This thing says my land belongs to Three Rivers Holdings. This stamp says a notary commissioned 5 days after he supposedly witnessed us sign. Your mailing address is a P.O. box. Your place of service is this bar." She didn't touch the papers. Her eyes moved, her fingers didn't. "Cole told me it was routine," she said at last. "Said I'd get a little fee to pick up letters and tell him if anything came that mattered. Said they needed a local name. Said it would help him fix a mess some stubborn people made. Do you know the notary?" She shook her head. Cole took me into a little office by the title place. The guy there looked like he'd been staying late for 3 months straight. Cole said, "This is my agent, just stamp it." The man stamped what Cole put in front of him. "I didn't see anyone sign anything. I don't know your signature from the flourishes on a bakery box. I didn't think—" She stopped. The bartender set a water at her elbow. She didn't drink it. "What else did Cole ask you to do?" I asked. "Use the P.O. box because he doesn't like mail at his shop. Keep my phone on. If he called from a number I didn't know, always answer." My club soda had gone flat. I set the glass aside. "Show me what you can," I said. "On the phone." Her thumb hesitated. Then she opened messages. There they were, Colin Barrett. Under one thread, a string of blocked private numbers under another. She scrolled, "Use this address. Don't ask questions. If someone asks, say you saw them sign." A voicemail icon showed a count. She opened one and held the speaker between us. Cole's voice wore the cheap shine it always wore when it tried to be calm and landed mean. "You're fine, N. It's handled. You get your cut when the bank paper clears. If anyone bothers you, send them to me. Don't run your mouth about the details. You're good." She looked at me quickly the way a person looks at a mirror after a bad haircut. "Am I in trouble?" I didn't say she might be a witness or worse. I didn't say what charges look like on paper when men get sloppy. I let the facts we both could see do their work. "I need you to forward those to me," I said. "The ones where he instructs you. The ones where he mentions the bank. The ones where he tells you to say you saw what you didn't." The door opened before she could answer. 2 men came in country clean boots and jackets with a sheen that said they cared about first impressions. One wore a Barrett Motors cap. They scanned like men used to owning a room by looking at it. "Evening," the bartender said to keep them ordinary. They didn't answer the bartender. They looked at our corner like a dog looks at a rabbit hole it has the measure of. I moved the envelope to my lap and set my hand on my coat pocket, not on the badge, but near. Nina's hand left her purse and went flat on the table. "Problem?" the taller one asked. Which is not a question when it's asked that way. I put my palm on the table, fingers wide, and the joints popped in a way that made the line of conversation change a little. "Sit and order," I said, "or find a different door." "In?" He smirked for his friend like a show needed an audience. "Didn't know this was your place." "It's not," I said. "It's a place where people drink in peace." The bartender wiped the bar with a rag he didn't need right then. "You boys want something?" They ordered 2 drafts they didn't want, and while the bartender pulled them, the shorter one nudged the taller toward the far end of the room. The taller didn't move. I reached in my coat, took out the badge, and set it on the table so the neon could find the 5-point star. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact that changed the air. The taller man looked, and the look took something out of him. He turned his shoulder as if the TV were interesting. When the beers came, they carried them to a table by the door and sat where they could keep their eyes working without their necks. Nina let out the breath she'd been holding. If there was gratitude in it, it didn't have time to grow. She unlocked the phone again. Where do I send them? Where do I gave her an email. She forwarded 3 voicemails, 5 screenshots of messages, where Cole became more specific the closer he got to whatever he'd promised himself. One text read, "Monroe's commissioning date is a typo. Don't get jumpy." Another read, "Once the deed records, we go to the bank. Don't screw this up by asking questions." The last was a photo of a check stub with a memo line that said Services TRH dated the day before the deed's recording. She watched the sending wheel spin like a coin. "He's going to be mad," she said. The words were plain, not dramatic. They had weight because they were small. "You can write your own name on a page that says what happened." I said, "That page holds more than a text when someone asks what you did and why." She looked past me at the neon chewing its own light. The 2 men at the door pretended to talk baseball. She took the water and drank half like the glass had rules she meant to follow. "I didn't know about your daughter," she said into the rim. "I knew he could be sharp. I didn't know it cut like that." I didn't answer that. I slid a pen from my pocket and set it near the edge of the table. She stared at it long enough that the bartender turned the TV sound up a notch to give us a cover we didn't ask for. Finally, she took a napkin and wrote her full name and number in a hand that tried to be neat. Beneath it, she wrote, "I will tell the truth." She dated it. "Take a picture," she said, and I did. She folded the napkin twice and kept it. On the way out, one of the men lifted a chin at me like he wanted credit for being patient. I gave him nothing back. Outside, the rain had gone to a spit. The air had the clean metal smell it gets after a long rinse. My phone vibrated with the files Nina had sent. Each one landed in the folder I'd opened that morning, lined up in the order a person would need if they were making sense where others had made noise. I crossed E, made the envelope under my arm warm from my hand, and drove home down a road that knew my tires. The porch light found the truck as if it had been watching for it. Inside, the soup pot still held warmth, and June slept the kind of sleep that has no dreams left in it. I set the envelope on the kitchen table, laid the phone beside it, and listened to the house breathe until the hour was more night than evening again. By the time the courthouse opened, the rain had rinsed the town clean and left the flag on the square hanging wet and heavy. I parked behind the building where employees slip in and the rest of us pretend we don't know that door exists. The stone steps out front still took the weight, though, and I climbed them with June on my arm. She wore a pale scarf that sat easy against her throat and took the edge off the color at her jaw. She didn't lean, but I felt the work it cost her not to. The hallway outside Judge Denton's courtroom smelled like lemon oil and old paper. A bailiff with a kind face and a short haircut took our names and waved us toward a bench. Across the aisle, Cole stood with a man in a navy suit that fit like a promise. The 2 men from Blue Lantern sat a row behind him, buttoned up and trying to look like they belonged at a baptism. When Cole saw us, he kept his mouth flat, but the muscles under the skin of his cheek twitched. He wore a tie the color of a bruise you'd see on day 3. Avery arrived at 9 sharp with a trial bag you could land a small plane on. He didn't say hello. He nodded once, sat and began laying out papers in an order that would not forgive a mistake. He had dividers labeled with handwriting so small and clean it lived next door to print. Dr. Patel slipped in a moment later, in a charcoal suit and low shoes, her hair in the same neat coil she wore on rounds. She gave me a look that said she'd testify to what she'd seen, and only that. The bailiff called the room to order. Wood creaked, the quiet fell. Judge Marisol Denton took the bench like a person who expects the furniture to hold. She was mid-50s, shoulders, square eyes that moved fast and missed little. The state flag hung at her left, the seal looked back from the paneling. The clock on the back wall ticked in a steady way that did not rush anyone. "This is Hollis versus the Three Rivers Holdings, LLC and related motions," the clerk read voice even. "Domestic civil protection order requested by June Hollis against Cole Barrett, and emergency relief regarding recorded transfer of real property." Judge Denton glanced at the docket sheet. Counsel appearances. Avery rose. Avery Pike for May and June Hollis. The navy suit stood. Brandon Keene for Three Rivers Holdings and for Mr. Barrett in the civil protection matter. "Very well," the judge said. "Mr. Pike, you have the burden." Avery didn't clear his throat or soften his voice. He put the first exhibit on the projector as if he'd practiced the movement and believed in muscle memory. The screen woke with a soft hum, a photograph of June's mouth, the split at the corner, the way the skin around it had gone tight. Your Honor, plaintiffs seek a temporary civil protection order and emergency relief to set aside a deed recorded last week. We will present a short chain of evidence, medical documentation of assault, contemporaneous digital communications from Mr. Barrett to Ms. Hollis, a third-party video capturing Ms. Hollis's arrival at her mother's home shortly after midnight, and records showing a deed notarized by a notary whose commission had not yet begun on the date reflected. We will also present business filings establishing the LLC's connection to an individual present today, Ms. Shore, who has provided messages from Mr. Barrett instructing her to act as agent and to misrepresent events. Keene stood on his turn like a man used to being the first call people make when money needs a lawyer. Your Honor, we object to this circus of innuendo. There is no criminal complaint. There is no sworn statement from a notary. What we have is a retired trooper waving around old habits and a family dispute dressed as an emergency. My client denies any domestic violence and denies any fraud. He has been harassed and threatened in his livelihood by Ms. Hollis, who continues to trade on her past office. Sit, the judge said without raising her voice. Keene sat. Avery called Dr. Patel first. She kept her eyes on the judge, not on June, as if to spare the room the intimacy of a direct line between the two. She used the words she always used, contusion tenderness to palpation, no fractures evident on plain film's monitor for splenic injury, though no immediate hemodynamic instability. She did not color outside the lines. When Keene asked whether she could determine the force used or the object, she said, not with certainty, and left it there like a good doctor leaves a white coat on its hook. Avery moved to the photographs, under-eye swelling, linear bruising along the lower ribs, the scrape at the knuckles. He did not linger. The projector hummed. The images came and went like weather systems. He played 10 seconds of a voicemail from a number labeled private. Keep your mouth shut, or... He stopped it before the end. Keene objected to foundation. Avery laid it by having June identify her phone number and the recorded voice. The judge admitted the clip for the limited purpose of showing context, not truth, of the matter asserted. It was enough. Next, Avery said, and the Porch camera footage from the Ortegas' system filled the screen. The timestamp read 12:37 a.m., June, small under the light, knocked with 3 short raps. She wrapped her left arm around her ribs and leaned into the door like it might lean back. The audio carried just enough, Mom, it's me. The judge watched, face unreadable. The room watched because it had to. Avery put up the deed, Hollis Farm to Three Rivers Holdings. He walked the judge to the acknowledgement block like you'd walk someone to a fence line to show them where the posts didn't run straight. Commission expires 02/18/2029. Notarization date 10 days earlier than commission start. He put up a photograph of the county notary board with Monroe Trevor's commission issue date. 5 days after the date, the deed claimed he'd witnessed signatures. He offered a printout from the Secretary of State's site showing Three Rivers Holdings formed last month, statutory agent Shore, Nina L. Service, at place of employment Blue Lantern E. Maine. Keene objected to trial by slideshow. The judge overruled, eyes back on the screen. Avery called Nina. She walked to the stand with her lips pressed together and one hand on a strap of her purse. She took the oath soft and clear. She didn't look at Cole. She looked at her hands until Avery put a copy of a message in front of her and asked who had sent it. Cole, she said. Mr. Barrett. What does it say? Use this address. Don't ask questions. If someone asks, say you saw them sign. Did you see them sign? No. Did you act as statutory agent for Three Rivers Holdings? Yes. Why? He asked. Said it was routine, a favor. Said I'd get a small fee. Said the county needed things straightened out. Did he promise you money? She swallowed. Yes. Avery didn't pace. He advanced by inches. He played a second voicemail, the one where Cole's voice tried to sound calm and slid mean. He entered a photograph of a check stub with services TRH on the memo line, dated the day before recording. He kept his tone so plain the room could not tag it as anything but road. Keene rose, smiling like he meant to use charm as a pry bar. Ms. Shore, you have a criminal record, don't you? No. You drink at your workplace. I pour drinks. You're angry at my client because he ended a friendship. There wasn't one. You're testifying today because Ms. Hollis promised you something. No. What did she put on the table at the Blue Lantern? A badge, Nina said. A threat. A fact, she said, and the judge did not tell her to limit herself. Keene smiled harder, then gave up the angle and sat. Avery called me. I told the truth like a person laying out tools in the order they're used. The camera in my pocket, the photographs, the download of the Porch clip to a cloud folder, the voicemail saved. The call to Rudy, the Secretary of State kiosk, the notary board, the way the commission dates lined wrong, the way a notary seal makes a dent you can feel with a fingertip and the ink still looks too new. I didn't look at Cole. Keene took his turn. Ms. Hollis, you were a trooper for 15 years. 20. You like to investigate. I like to be thorough. You flashed a badge at my client's friends to intimidate them. I put it on a table when two men stood over another woman. You've been seen at the county offices taking photographs of boards meant for employees. Public board in a public hallway. You're vengeful. I'm a mother, I said, and if the word weighed more than the others, I didn't apologize for it. He held up a printed grainy photo of me in the recorder's office. You're using your past office to bully people into doing what you want. I used my driver's license to park in a legal spot and my voice to ask for a public copy. No one was bullied. He let the photo drop like that settled his point. The judge did not look impressed. Avery called Rudy last. He wore his best shirt and spoke like a man who knows numbers aren't personal. He explained e-recording and title company protocols in terms anyone could follow. He said a notary's commission date is public record. He said he could not produce Mr. Monroe's notary log without a subpoena, and he would follow the law when told to. He did not say anything that would get him in trouble in the building he worked in. Keene objected to all of it and then objected to his own objection. The judge overruled most and sustained one on hearsay. Avery fixed the angle and came back through the other door. When we were done, the room felt like the air before a storm that either breaks or passes. The judge looked at her notes, then at the clock, then at us. She took a breath that wasn't dramatic, just full. Here's what I find, she said. Photographs and medical testimony support injuries consistent with an assault. Contemporaneous communications from Mr. Barrett to Ms. Hollis are threatening. A third-party video corroborates Ms. Hollis's account of seeking refuge shortly after midnight on the date in question. A deed transferring Hollis Farm to Three Rivers Holdings LLC bears a notarization date that predates the notary's commission. The statutory agent for that LLC testified credibly that she did not witness the alleged signatory's sign and that Mr. Barrett directed her to make false statements and to use a post office box and workplace address to receive legal mail. Keene started to rise. The judge lifted a hand. He sat. The court grants Ms. June Hollis a domestic civil protection order. Mr. Barrett shall have no contact with her directly or indirectly and shall maintain a distance of 500 feet from her person, residence, and place of employment. The court further finds a substantial likelihood of success on the merits regarding the validity of the deed and a risk of irreparable harm if injunctive relief is not granted. The recording of the deed to Three Rivers Holdings is hereby stayed and set aside pending further order. Any attempt to encumber or transfer the subject property is enjoined. The court orders a temporary freeze on assets identified in the affidavit pertaining to this transaction limited to accounts used in connection with Three Rivers Holdings to preserve the status quo. She paused. Given the testimony regarding potential criminal conduct, the court will refer the matter to the prosecutor for review. Counsel will prepare orders. The gavel didn't slam. It touched wood with enough sound to count. The room exhaled. The deacon from First Baptist looked down and clasped his hands like a man who'd been caught talking during service. The two men from Blue Lantern stood and sat again, without deciding why they'd changed their minds. Cole stood too fast. "This is a joke," he said, voice tight, shoulders up. "You people don't know who you're—" "Mr. Barrett," the judge said, not raising her tone. "You will conduct yourself with respect in my courtroom." Keene put a hand on Cole's sleeve that meant sit. Cole jerked, not violent, just the motion of a man who can't find a door he thought he'd left open. The bailiff took one step forward and then didn't need the second. Cole sat. Clerks began to shuffle paper. The copier down the hall woke to life. Avery leaned over and spoke two words that meant good, then stood to work with the clerk on language. Dr. Patel squeezed June's shoulder once and made for the door, eyes on her schedule. Nina stayed seated like a person who knows that moving too fast, after standing up, can make your head go gray for a second. I thanked her. She nodded without finding words. Out in the hall, the lemon oil smell seemed stronger, or maybe the stress had stripped varnish from my senses, and now everything moved in clean lines again. People who had said too much the week before cleared their throats and found other things to look at. The rain had stopped. The windows along the corridor held a reflection of the square like a postcard laid against glass. Avery came out with a thin stack of paper-clipped square. "Orders," he said. He didn't hand them to me. He handed them to June. She took them with both hands like they might have weight. We walked the steps together, careful because wet stone can turn a good day careless. The air outside had that bright-washed look it gets after a storm, colors truer than you remembered. Across the street, someone had left a bouquet of supermarket flowers in a soda bottle on the courthouse lawn, wilting but upright. I didn't try to take that as anything. We reached the truck. I held the door and June climbed in with the slow economy of a person who listens to her own ribs. I rounded the hood and slid behind the wheel. For a long beat, neither of us said anything. The papers lay between us on the bench, seat edges, square ink still smelling faintly like it meant to set. We didn't speak until the courthouse was behind us and the truck found the two-lane that leads out past the feed store and the river bend. The orders lay on the bench seat between us, edges squared, the paper warm from the sun, that had bullied its way back through the clouds. June traced the clip with a fingertip, then let her hand fall. The scarf at her throat softened the hard lines of color along her jaw. I drove the way I pruned slow with attention, no sudden cuts. At home, I slid the orders into a page protector and pinned them to the inside of the pantry door between the flour bin and the shelf where the dog biscuits used to live. June stood in the kitchen long enough to watch me shut the door like you close a cabinet on a noise. Then she lay down the kind of lay that means the body calls time and the mind obeys. By evening, the orchard had that rinsed look it gets after a long rain. I walked the rows with my hands in my coat and listened for the small things, the tick of a loosened wire on the fence, the dry rattle of a leaf that hadn't got the memo about spring. On my way back up the hill, I cut a length of twine from the spool in my pocket and fixed a sag. The house glowed at the kitchen window the way it did when Ben was alive and the music was on low and you could find your way by it. June woke easy the next morning. She ate toast and made a face at the ache under her ribs like she'd been introduced to a cousin who overstayed. At noon, she sat across from Dr. Patel and answered questions about pain on a scale of 1 to 10 with the seriousness of a person who means to do this right. We came home and she slept again. The house took the rhythm and kept it. People who had filled up on their own opinions the week before found other things to say. Mrs. Ortega left a paper plate of cookies on the porch with a note that read, "Warm if you like." The deacon from First Baptist stopped on the lane and tipped his hat without a speech. The man from the diner set a gallon of cider on the stoop and knocked only once. I didn't keep score. I stacked what was given where it would be used and let the rest go, where small talk goes when it runs out of road. Nina came by Avery's office 2 days after court and left an envelope with her full affidavit and a photocopy of a receipt from the bank that made the check's memo line more than an idea. Avery called to say it was complete enough and that he'd filed what needed filing. He didn't ask for a thank you, and I didn't hand him one. He worked and we breathed. Nights got quieter. June still woke sometimes the way a person wakes when the world has taught them to listen too hard. When she did, I sat in the doorway with the hall light making a strip across the carpet and counted my breath down to a number that let hers catch it. The old police scanner on the bookshelf stayed unplugged. Some noises don't help a house. By the second week, June wanted to ride into town. She moved like a person who'd measured her steps and kept the receipt. We stopped at the veterinary clinic on Maple, where the sign out front had a cartoon beagle drawn by somebody who loved the idea of dogs more than the particulars. The office smelled like damp wool and antiseptic and a little like hay. Dr. Shu at the desk took one look at June's eyes and asked if she was the kind of person who could stand long shifts on her feet. June said yes. The answer found its own chair and sat down. She started 3 afternoons a week. She came home in scrubs the color of lake water with hair that had come loose and dug at her scalp and hands that smelled faintly of iodine and kitten. She talked about a border collie who hated his bandage and a rabbit who tolerated everything with a kind of offended grace. The house learned to hold those stories and set them beside the old ones without getting in their way. I went down to the sheriff's office on Thursdays. They keep a corner room for victims to sit when they don't want the main lobby in all its eyes. The chairs are covered in fabric that looks like it wants to be cheerful, and the little table holds a box of tissues and a dish of candy that gets replaced before it runs out. I sat with Deputy Morse the first day while he cleared paperwork enough to see the desk under it. "You can talk to them," he said. "You know how to listen in a way that makes the talking possible." So I did. I signed no forms, promised nothing I couldn't carry, and let the room be the room it was built to be. One afternoon, a girl stood in the doorway with a backpack that had been new to somebody else and asked if she was in the right place. I said she was. She sat on the edge of the chair like the chair charged rent by the minute. The story came out wrong way first in the way of stories, then lined itself up. I asked if she wanted water. She nodded. When I set the cup down, our fingers clicked against the same spot on the table, and she made a sound that wasn't a word and let herself cry. We didn't hurry. When she finished, she put both palms flat on her knees as if she'd remembered they belonged to her. I walked her to the advocate's office. She walked on her own legs. The orchard didn't wait on us. Buds cracked and the bees came like they always do late, and then all at once. I sharpened the pruners and found the old groove in my glove where the handle sits. June stood at the end of a row and counted 10 between stakes. The air carried that green wet sweetness you only get for a week and a half before it turns to full leaf and gives up the secrets. We ate lunch on the tailgate and watched a cloud shadow roll across the ridge like a hand laying itself on a quilt and taking it back. Paper stayed where it belonged. The orders on the pantry door. The deed copies in a red file under the calendar. Nina's affidavit in Avery's drawer and a scan in my cloud folder that I checked twice and then let alone. The trooper's hat went into the wardrobe with the winter coat's brim tucked under the sleeve of a parka. Ben wore ice fishing the year the river froze hard enough to set chairs on it. None of it was a ritual. It was a way to keep a house where each thing has a place, and each morning doesn't start by looking for what you need. Late one afternoon, the first apple of the season fell before it should small heart a kind of impatience. It thumped the grass and rolled to a stop against a strip of sunlight. I picked it up and thumbed a bruise that hadn't formed yet. June came down the row with a dog from the clinic that needed a weekend place to be, for a while a mutt colored like a field in late August. The dog trotted wide circles around her ankles and then settled under the truck as if it had always known where to nap. June leaned beside me against the fence post and let the quiet do the talking. The porch light clicked on when it was time. The house exhaled. We went inside, turned on the radio low, and let the kitchen fill with whatever the station was giving away at that hour. I washed one apple from last year we'd kept too long, and we split it with a knife that had belonged to my grandmother. The air held a thread of honeysuckle from the ditch and something else I hadn't smelled in months, rest maybe, or the absence of clatter. When the evening pulled itself across the orchard and the rose went to darker rose, I stood at the back door for a beat and listened. No knock, no phone vibrating on a hard tray. Just the fridge cycling and the floor settling like a boat finding its line. I switched off the kitchen light and left the porch one burning. It threw a clean circle on the steps. The night fit around it careful and whole. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.